Hey Dylan, it's Dr. Scott. I have some feedback for you on your second essay, the visual analysis. By the way, I love your title. That is pretty cool. I'll kind of go through and explain how you did on the main criteria of the assignment by going from the beginning of your essay to the end. The main criteria were a thesis statement that makes a claim, it has supporting reasons, it has a clear subject, and then there's organization, there's a reason why you're going from paragraph to paragraph. Then I was also taking a look at your use of details to support what you're saying. And then finally integrating sources and making sure that you're integrating sources in a way that's talk about them afterwards. So I want to say at the forefront you have what I think is a really strong claim, especially towards the end of the essay. You get pretty eloquent there, talking about Portsmouth has kind of impressed people, given its size and given what it's been through. It's really kind of come through a lot, and it's a stronger town for it. An impressive city, which you say down here. The thing that's missing in the thesis statement, and this is super important to your revision, is that the reasons are not there yet. So you're kind of saying, and you don't really have a thesis statement that kind of crystallizes everything, but it's kind of like saying the flood wall murals inspire pride in people in the history of the town through the use of blank and maybe blank. So what are the two or three things that the murals do to try and get this idea across? Like the murals that you're taking a look at, some folks have written about colors. They've looked into the emotion that the murals use to try and convey a thought. There's a lot of different things that you could use. Facial expressions, how they position humans, how they design things, the overall tone of the piece. There's a lot of different things that you can kind of pick from and say, these are the ways that this mural or these murals kind of get their idea across. For the flooding of Alexandria in the 1937 flood, you mention this later, but it's not really an essential part of your essay, and it could be, and that's nature. Nature is a huge part, so you could have a thesis statement where you're kind of claiming that these two flood wall murals remind us that nature is always present, but that this town kind of overcomes its struggles with, kind of like holding nature at really the river's edge, literally. So the thesis statement is kind of a big deal, and it's not kind of coming together with that how part of it. And you'll see my comments over here on the side. And these are just kind of notes for me, but they should kind of give you an idea of where I'm going with my feedback. Just like the sample essay that we looked at today in class, organizing your paragraphs by, all right, here's one flood wall mural, and then here's another flood wall mural. That's really not going to kind of put the emphasis on your ideas, but the emphasis on your argument, and that's where you want it to be. So you can have you can have a paragraph where you're talking about one method that they try to get this idea across, this impressive city or whatever that you're trying to, the town is resilient or that it bounces back from things, and they do that through showing by using colors. Cool. You can do that. There's a few people that have written pretty solid paragraphs about that. That would be what that entire paragraph is about, and then you're writing about both murals in that paragraph, and that's something that really kind of needs to come through. You do a solid job writing and using detail, and I really like that. I think the detail isn't always kind of supporting a main argument. Sometimes it's just you're providing great detail, but it's not exactly clear what it's being used for as far as supporting your argument. And again, I think that kind of goes back to the thesis statement, clarifying that so that it's much easier to kind of see how these details are kind of related to this bigger argument that you have. When you integrate sources, one of the no-nos is ending a paragraph with a quote, and so you always need to be kind of supporting your quotes. Later down here where you're talking about Drew Fite, you really don't tell us who that is, so there should be kind of something in there that says, according to this, professor at Shawnee State University, he kind of says this, and you can paraphrase like you're doing that here, but we need to know who these people are and why they're useful. This information itself, I don't see it working with the other paragraphs, and it kind of seems like it's thrown in there a little bit. This might be relevant for an introduction. I could see you integrating it in there and say, you know what, Portsmouth has had a troubled history, and then you kind of get to talking about the floods, and then you kind of introduce us to the thesis statement. I could see that working, but here in the body paragraph, it's kind of confusing. Again, like you have several places towards the end of your essay where you are pretty eloquent in talking about like what the visuals do, like showing the disastrous past, showing that Portsmouth is a tough city, and that the citizens don't stay down. How do they do that? That's the super important question to answer moving forward. Do they do it through, again, use of color, design, how they space things out in the murals? Like, there's a lot of different ways, but something in the visual that itself is trying to get an idea across. Yeah, that's really kind of important. I guess the other thing that I would kind of say, and I'm not trying to like totally revamp your essay, but you've chosen two murals that are writing about nature, and I could understand like having a thesis statement that's focusing on nature. If you're really focusing on like the town will not be held down, you've chosen two murals that are about the town being held down, but not kind of rebounding necessarily. And so I'm wondering if you need the flooding of Alexandria. Like if the flooding of Alexandria, given what you're trying to argue, is really just kind of repeating what the 1937 flood mural does. If that doesn't make sense, remind me that I said that, because I will not remember that, but I think that that's kind of an important thing to think about. Yeah, I mean, you write about, courage, resilience, like some really awesome things. The next step is like, okay, how do they get this stuff across? And maybe even limiting it and say like, okay, if courage is the thing that you're talking about, that might be kind of tough. But I think your paper is right in here, partner. I think it's right in there. You're not going to keep the citizens down, show that Portsmouth's a tough city. And again, I guess I come back to the choice of murals. Both of these are showing, yeah, the city's down, but there should be maybe a mural that you're choosing that says, you know what, the city rebounds. Let's talk grade for a second. Let me pause this, and then the screen's going to look really kind of different, and it's going to be me finishing out the rubric real quick. All right, so let me walk this over here. Thesis statement, I didn't see one just yet. I see you making claims. I don't see a single sentence in your essay that kind of clarifies what exactly you're trying to argue and the reasons why you think your interpretation is correct. So that needs to get some work. Supporting details, you do a great job of writing about details. They're not always supporting a thesis statement, but you've got great details, so I think you're a bit closer there. Organization and transitions, I didn't touch on this that much, but there needs to be a reason why you're moving from one paragraph to another. Like that sample essay that we looked at today, there wasn't a very clear reason why the writer was going from one idea to another. There does need to be, in your paper and in everybody's paper. So if you're starting with saying, contrasting colors show that Portsmouth is a tough town and you can't keep its people down. Cool. But why is that first? Is it like the most effective? Was it like the most obvious? Was it the least obvious? Like, how are you kind of organizing? How are you organizing the ideas? Source integration, close there. Again, ending a paragraph with a quote is a no-no, and make sure that you kind of set up your quotes and talk about them afterwards. And then close to satisfactory here with the MLA format. There's a list of works cited, looks a little funky. It should have a hanging indent so the second line kind of comes in a little bit. And I don't know what Union Stables is. I think you might need to explain that in your essay too. But you're close. You're close with that stuff. There's captions on so you're actually really close. You know what? I think we'll call the miscellaneous thing, we'll call that satisfactory. I think I could live with that. Okay. But that's where the essay's at right now. Alright, Dylan, if you have questions, let me know on Thursday. We'll also be in the library on Wednesday, and you can ask me some questions then if you have initial things that you really need to get clarified. Alright, that's it for now. I'll talk to you soon.